Good afternoon, everyone. While listening to Mark Meadows' piece before, it seems obvious to me why anyone would choose a career in music. It's just such a beautiful thing, right? But why mathematics? Why on earth would anyone choose math as a field of discipline to study? Why would anyone choose to construct a career in math? Okay. I talk to a lot of students as Director of Undergraduate Studies in math, and a lot of students come to me with questions about their major, or they want to study math as a major or as a minor. And these questions typically revolve around, questions of logistics, questions of courses they want to take, questions of maybe what kind of careers there are in mathematics, maybe questions of, how it relates to their other disciplines. But there always seems to be this undertone in all those conversations in about mathematics. And that is, why do I want to study math? What is mathematics? What do mathematicians actually do? Besides, teach, I guess. And I have a lot of stock answers that I give to students because I thought about this a lot, and I've worked not only in academia but also in industry for many years. And I try to tailor those answers to what an individual student's needs and desires and aspirations are. But I realized recently that I've never actually fully explored why I chose mathematics. What math means to me, why mathematics in my case. You see, as I already mentioned, my situation is a little bit unique. I wasn't an undergraduate mathematics major. My first academic passion, I guess this is the hook for firsts, right? My first academic passion was not math. No, I wanted to study architecture. I loved architecture. The idea of crafting space for human use, that just seems so cool to me, right? So I started in architecture school as an undergrad, and one of the first exercises the professors gave us was to collectively come up with a definition for what architecture was. And what we came up with, it's a thoughtful making of space. And I love that. That spoke to me, right? That seemed something I really wanted to get into. Okay, well, it took me about 1.5 years to realize it wasn't really speaking to me. There were a lot of things about architecture I didn't like. I started to second guess my first academic passion. And if I polled you guys out there, especially the students out here, about second guessing your first academic passion, I'm sure I'd get some responses to that, right? Anyway, so I stepped out of architecture and I moved into engineering because it was in the same college, and I got a degree in engineering, and I liked it. It didn't really speak to me, but I liked it. Decided I really didn't want a real job, so I wanted to stay in school. So I went for a master's degree in applied mathematics. You can see I'm heading somewhere now. Then I worked for a while at a couple of research laboratories, including Goddard Space Flight Center and the Hubble Space Telescope project. That was actually really, really cool. But I decided I wanted to go back to school again. My parents started calling me a professional student. And I wanted to study math this time, but math physics, because the math, in my mind, still needed to mean something in the real world. It didn't make sense on its own. I needed the hook. Well, it took about 1.5 years to realize I don't need any hooks. I jettisoned any hope for any applications, and I started to study math for math's sake, because I realized something at that point, because my journey towards mathematics at that point made me realize something fundamental. Math is not a science. Okay, it's the M in STEM, right? But unlike science, technology, and engineering, we're not trying to describe or explain the real world. We're not about experimentation. Okay, we are sometimes, but not as a discipline. We're not about computation and calculation like we believe we are when we're in primary and secondary and undergraduate days and stuff. No, to be really honest, math's not really about numbers. Okay, it is. We have numbers, and we have this arithmetic system that we build over our numbers, but really that's just to create a logically consistent, a sufficiently complex platform on which we can build the rest of our mathematical constructions. It's not the numbers. It's the ideas behind the numbers, because math is really just about ideas. It's about logical structure. Okay? In essence, I can take that definition that I gave you before of architecture and change it slightly and say that mathematics is the thoughtful making of logical structure. Okay, in that sense, it's not a science at all. So then what is it? Why mathematics? Well, most mathematics departments live in a college of arts and sciences, right? In their respective universities. So if it's not a science, perhaps it's an art. And here I think we're on firmer ground. A mathematician, Paul Lockhart, about 12 years ago wrote an essay called A Mathematician's Lament. And in this essay, he talks about the appalling nature of mathematics at the primary and secondary level. And he compares it to music. In essence, basically saying something like, if we taught music like we taught mathematics, then we'd be playing with scales all day and would never actually hear music until long into our high school or college days. And if we wanted to hum our own tune, that's grad school, that's research. He has a quote in this essay, "Mathematics is the music of reason." Very nice, right? And like math, or like music, math is built on a very rigidly defined, in fact, you heard Mark Meadows before, right? Math is built on a very rigid, very well-defined set of rules. But our mathematical constructions exhibit an infinite amount of creativity. Unlike music, to understand and appreciate those mathematical constructions, one needs to be mathematically literate. John Allen Paulus, a writer and mathematician, professor at Temple, would say numerate for mathematical literacy. Okay? But like music, mathematics has a very well-defined, very refined value system that we attach to our music. In fact, to our construction. In fact, you can't separate the mathematical constructions from their value. Right? We have this aesthetic quality that we give to our mathematical constructions, and it's vitally important for us. We can talk about some mathematics being more interesting than other mathematics. We can talk about a formula being elegant. We can talk about a mathematical construction being stunning. We talk about proofs being beautiful. I was at a cocktail party recently, because mathematicians, we get invited to cocktail parties because we're so good at them, right? I was at a cocktail party recently in my hometown of Tacoma Park, and I was talking to a neighbor who I didn't know very well, and we were trying to get to know each other. So we were chatting about various things, about what we do and such. And at some point, he turns to me and he says, "What's all this? You keep mentioning beauty in mathematics. What's that all about? I don't get that." And my first thought was, this is why we're not invited to many cocktail parties, because no one actually understands us. Okay, so I answered him this way. Suppose you're a mathematician, and you take a logically consistent succession of ideas, other mathematical facts, things that are known to be true, and you put them together in such a way that at the end of the road you can deduce a new fact. That becomes like a theorem or something. That becomes a bit of mathematics. In essence, in a way, you've written a mathematical proof. Other mathematicians will come around and they'll look at your proof and they'll say, they'll look at it, they'll check its validity, and if it's valid, they'll say, thank you. You've created another Lego block for our giant Lego construction, which is all of mathematics. Now let's say instead, you've created this logically consistent succession of ideas, creating a new fact, and you provided a bit of inside that proof. You provided a bit of insight as to why those facts fit together so nicely in a way that no one has ever seen before. Now the mathematician is going to come around, they're going to check the validity of your proof, and they're going to say, hey, that's clever. That's interesting. See, interesting is one of the more dangerous words in mathematics. If you hear a teacher say it, you know what's coming up is not going to be easy. Roughly speaking, the definition of interesting in mathematics is hard. Hard, but worthy of study. Okay. See, now your mathematics has value to it because you've provided that insight. Now it's something you've added value to the construction. Let's take this one step further. You have this logically consistent succession of ideas which forms this new fact. You've added some, provided a bit of insight as to why those facts fit together so nicely, and you've also provided a bit of a roadmap as to what the next logical questions might be, where to go from here. The metaphor would be you're in a dark room and you find an object, and that object is your new fact, your new proof. And you shout out in the dark room, hey, I got a proof here, and all the other mathematicians would be happy to hear about that, and they might come over to check out your object. Now let's say you've also provided a little bit of a lantern in that dark room to illuminate that proof. And the mathematicians, of course, they'll be drawn to the light, right? They'll come over to the light, and they'll check it out, and they'll say, ooh, look, I could almost see the nearby objects. Hey, let's go explore those too. See, now you're actually providing not just insight, but you're providing a method for generating future directions of exploration. Now your math is deemed nice. Now people are writing you emails asking you what your next thoughts are, and perhaps we should work together on this. You're a contributor. Let's take this to a logical extreme. Let's say you created this logically consistent succession of ideas, creating this new fact, you provide a bit of insight as to why these facts fit together so nicely. You provide a bit of a roadmap as to what the next logical questions might be. Now let's say your mathematics is so darn good that it establishes a connection from an area of mathematics no one would have ever dreamed would be connected logically. Or your mathematics is so strong and so many mathematicians come over to check out your object and work in that room that you're in that your math winds up getting its own name, like hyperbolic dynamics or geometric group theory or arithmetic geometry. My field of study is algebraic dynamics. Sounds cool, right? Or let's say your mathematics is so strong that it helps to resolve a 40-year-old conjecture whose consequence is a 300-year-old conundrum. Footnote, see Fermat, the last theorem of. Recently, I think that was in the news, right? Okay. Now you've gone and done something. Now you've gone and not just generated a bit of buzz. No, you've got people just clamoring to talk to you about what your insight is. They're looking at every detail of your proof. They're thinking it's amazing stuff. Oh my God, this is transformational stuff. You're being invited to give a talk at another university, perhaps never leaving that university again. Right? Now your math is deemed amazing and possibly even beautiful, and someone might actually come up to you and say, hey, that's from the book. Because you see, we have this expression in mathematics, perfect mathematics that cannot be improved upon, that has all those qualities I mentioned before, can be deemed from the book. You see a very wonderful, very prolific, very eccentric, of course we all are, but every eccentric mathematician who recently died, his name was Paul Erdős, had this idea that God has a book of perfect mathematical proofs. And if your math is deemed from the book, there's a Venus right there. Right? So yeah, we have a very well-defined, very refined sense of value that we give to our mathematics. But there's something else about math that's different from almost every other art you can possibly come up with. Nothing we create. Nothing from that conjecture that establishes Fermat's last theorem all the way down to such baseline objects as the number 2 or the plus sign. Nothing we create is real. They're all just wisps of imagination. They're all just bits of logic living really nowhere. In fact, the entire Lego construction of mathematics really only lives in the collective consciousness of everyone who's ever thought about mathematics. Yeah, we write. We write a lot. We've been writing for a very, very long time. And we, well, the board's not here, but we draw stuff up on the board, right? But what we draw on the board, they're just schematics. And what we write is really nothing more than descriptions. You know, when you read a mathematics paper, you have to literally work at it to reconstruct that mathematics in your mind from what's the description given on it. This is why, you know, reading a math textbook is so darn hard, because it's got to be an active experience. Okay. So if I'm going to transmit a bit of mathematics from me, well, actually, let me talk about this first. If I'm going to talk to if I'm in a class and I'm talking to my students, I say, hey guys, let's talk about the real line. I put the real line up on the board. Everyone in that room knows that's not the real line. There is no real line. Not really. The real line, if I'd pegged it up on that board and put the 0 up there, would be infinitely thin so that no one could actually see it. And it would extend actually not just along the board, but through the wall and out across campus and across the town and pretty much farther than the known universe in more than one direction. if I'm going to transmit a bit of mathematics from me to my students or to my colleagues if I'm giving a seminar, I've got to do it through a brain-to-brain connection, imagination to imagination. I've got to sit there and describe using words of what I'm doing, and I've got to get them to reconstruct that thing in their mind. And that's the only way to transmit mathematics, right? And that's why it's got to be a dialogue. See, even when I'm giving a lecture, it's a dialogue. If I'm the only one talking, it's still a dialogue because I'm reading the faces of my students, because I'm trying to get them to build that construction in their mind that I have in my mind, right? And really, the only way to get through them is to sit there and just work with them and watch their faces as I'm describing that mathematics. And I'm trying to get them to understand this very complicated thing. And I'm attacking it from 2 or 3 angles. And I'm drawing pictures on the board. I'm using examples. I'm basically trying to get students to help in that description. I'm watching those students that are still, they have that hard face of concentration. They're working really, really hard, trying to get it. And I'm looking for it, right? I'm looking for something when you teach, right? Every teacher knows exactly what I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for that moment when you make that brain-to-brain connection. I'm looking for that moment of recognition, right? That moment when you know you've established that connection. That moment when that screwed up face of concentration suddenly softens. It's a bit of a glint in the eye, right? The head goes back slightly and there's that audible, oh. We live for that as teachers. That's what teaching is all about, that moment right there, if and when it comes. But you know something? As mathematicians, that's not enough as a math teacher. Certainly in any subject, but certainly in mathematics, it's not enough. Because transmitting a bit of mathematical construction from one person to another is not mathematics. Because you can't separate the mathematical construction from its value system. Students need to understand why that math exists, where it fits into the whole, why it's valuable, in some sense, why it's beautiful. So our goal as teachers is not just to generate the recognition, it's to generate the emotional reaction. I don't want to see just the, oh. I want to see, oh, wow, oh, I get it. Oh, yeah, I get that. Then I know I've transmitted a bit of mathematics because now students see where it fits, why it's valuable. Okay, it doesn't happen that often. But it's still the goal, right? And then it hit me in a big, profound way. In a sense, it hit me, it was something that, sort of an epiphany for me. I learned something very, very important at that moment. And I need to thank the organizers for inviting me for this thing, because this was actually a big deal. That long, circuitous path to math, I guess you can call it, from architecture through engineering, through applied math, to math physics, to finally pure math. You know, in some sense, I never moved at all. My first academic passion, I never lost that. I actually achieved it, in a sense. Because what I'm doing now is I'm trying to build these wonderful creations in my head. I'm trying to get other people to understand them. I'm trying to get them to understand the value system. I'm trying to generate an emotional reaction to those mathematical constructions. When architects design buildings, they don't just put up 4 walls and a ceiling and say, okay, there's your building. It'll keep the weather out. Yeah, go, it's nice. You'll like it. No, they design a building because it's an art form to them. They design a building to generate an emotional reaction in the people that walk through that building. They want people to walk into that building and say, wow, I love this space. This space is awesome. And in a certain sense, that's what I'm doing here. I never really moved from my first academic passion. It always was. So really, in a broad sense, and in a very sort of profound way, at least for me, in my own way, this is why mathematics. Anyway, thank you. Thank you.